Some teams reach the Super Bowl and cement their legacy with dominance, but others collapse under the pressure in ways that fans will never forget. From historic choke jobs to heavy favorites that got blown out of the stadium, these 9 teams combined for 121 regular season wins and featured 7 MVPs. But on the biggest stage, everything fell apart. Here are the worst Super Bowl meltdowns in NFL history. Starting with the 2013 Denver Broncos, who had a regular season for the history books. They were putting up offensive numbers the league had literally never seen before. Peyton Manning, in his second year with Denver, was partying like it was 2004. At 37 years old, just 2 seasons removed from career-threatening neck surgery, he threw for 5,477 yards and 55 touchdowns. Both NFL records that still stand today, leading the Broncos to a 13-3 record and the #1 seed in the AFC. This was not only the best offense in the league, it was the highest scoring unit in NFL history, putting up 606 points in the regular season. Manning had a loaded supporting cast. Demaryius Thomas, Eric Decker, Wes Welker, and Julius Thomas all had over 10 touchdowns each. They rolled through the playoffs, defeating the Chargers and then taking down the Patriots 26-16 in the AFC Championship. Heading into Super Bowl 48, they were 2.5-point favorites over the Seattle Seahawks, a young team forming an all-time defense. But no one thought they could stop Peyton Manning's offensive machine. The Broncos had decimated opponents all season. All they had to do was finish the job. But it took exactly 12 seconds for everything to go wrong. On the very first play from scrimmage, the ball was snapped while Peyton Manning was audibling, leading to a safety for Seattle before the Broncos could even run a play. But that was just the beginning. Denver's offense, which had been unstoppable all season, suddenly looked completely helpless against the Legion of Boom. Manning was pressured on nearly every dropback, leading to 2 interceptions in the first half. The Broncos were already down 22-0 at halftime. Seattle scored again on the first play of the second half, this time on a Percy Harvin kickoff return touchdown. It was 36-0 before Denver even found the end zone. The final score? Seahawks 43, Broncos 8. The greatest offense in NFL history only managed 8 points and turned the ball over 4 times. Manning threw for 280 yards, but most of it came in garbage time. And in the aftermath, this loss was a stain on Peyton Manning's legacy. His playoff struggles were already a talking point, and this only made it worse. Fans and analysts wondered whether he had squandered his final chance to win another Super Bowl. Denver rebuilt their defense after this shocking embarrassment, adding DeMarcus Ware, Aqib Talib, and TJ Ward, completely shifting their identity. And these changes paid off, carrying them back to the Super Bowl just 2 years later. But before we get to that, we need to address the Seahawks' return to the Super Bowl the very next season, where they were on the verge of establishing a dynasty. The Legion of Boom, featuring Richard Sherman, Earl Thomas, and Cam Chancellor, was the best secondary in football, and their relentless front seven made Seattle's defense the most feared unit in the NFL. Offensively, Russell Wilson was emerging as a superstar, and Marshawn Lynch was still in his prime as one of the most dominant runners in the league. Seattle finished the 2014 season at 12-4, securing the #1 seed in the NFC and proving their championship run was no fluke. They escaped the NFC Championship game with a miraculous comeback against the Packers, winning in overtime 28-22. Now, they had a chance to become the first back-to-back Super Bowl champions since 2004. Ironically, their opponent was the team that did it, Tom Brady and Bill Belichick's New England Patriots. For 59 minutes, Seattle looked ready to secure their dynasty. Then, in the final seconds, they made one of the worst mistakes in NFL history. Super Bowl 49 was a classic, a back-and-forth game between the NFL's 2 best teams. Seattle led 24-14 entering the fourth quarter, looking like they were about to repeat as champs. But Tom Brady led 2 touchdown drives, putting the Patriots ahead 28-24 with just over 2 minutes left. Then the Seahawks answered right back. Wilson led one of the craziest late-game drives ever, highlighted by Jermaine Kearse's miracle catch, which set Seattle up at the New England 5-yard line with 1 minute left. On the next play, Marshawn Lynch bulldozed to the 1-yard line. Seattle had 2nd and goal with 26 seconds left, 1 timeout, and the most physical running back in the NFL. In the eyes of most, all they had to do was hand the ball to Marshawn Lynch and the Super Bowl was theirs. Instead, they called a quick slant pass over the middle. Russell Wilson fired to Ricardo Lockett, but Malcolm Butler jumped the route and picked it off. The Patriots took over, ran out the clock, and won the Super Bowl. Final score, Patriots 28, Seahawks 24. In the aftermath, the decision to throw the ball at the 1-yard line instead of giving it to Marshawn Lynch is still one of the most criticized play calls in NFL history. It turned Seattle into a dynasty that never was. Richard Sherman was visibly in shock. Marshawn Lynch left the team after the next season, and the Legion of Boom began to fall apart. Seattle never made it back to another Super Bowl, missing a golden opportunity to build a dynasty. Had the Seahawks won, they may have become the team of the 2010s. Instead, one bad play call erased nearly everything, and the next season, a new NFC champion was crowned. The 2015 Carolina Panthers came out of nowhere. They weren't supposed to run roughshod through the league, but from the moment the season started, they looked unbeatable, that had no elite receivers after Kelvin Benjamin tore his ACL. And the defense, led by Luke Kuechly, Thomas Davis, and Josh Norman, was one of the best in the league. They absolutely mopped the floor with a stacked Arizona Cardinals team 49-15 in the NFC Championship. And going into Super Bowl 50, they were 5-point favorites over the Denver Broncos, who now had an amazing defense, but Peyton Manning was on his last legs. Instead, the game became a nightmare for Carolina. From the very start, Denver's defense overwhelmed the Panthers. It was the Von Miller show. Midway through the first quarter, he strip-sacked Cam Newton, leading to a defensive touchdown by Malik Jackson. Newton was sacked 6 times, constantly under siege. The offense couldn't find the end zone, managing only 1 touchdown through the first 3 quarters. And trailing 16-10 in the fourth quarter, Newton had one last chance to rally his team, until Von Miller struck again. Another strip sack, another Broncos recovery. The moment that defined the game and haunted Newton's legacy came on that fumble. Instead of diving for the ball, Cam hesitated, backing away as Denver recovered. The game was effectively over. The final score 24 and the Panthers 10. In the aftermath, this would prove to be the beginning of the end of the Cam Newton era in Carolina. The Panthers never returned to the Super Bowl. Cam Newton was never the same player again. Injuries, inconsistent play, and front office changes led to his release in 2020. The Panthers quickly fell apart, finishing 6-10 the next year and entering a rebuild. For one season, the Panthers were on top of the NFL, and it looked like the start of something special. Instead, Super Bowl 50 ended everything before it truly began. Moving on, the 1997 Green Bay Packers came into the season as the reigning Super Bowl champs, and they looked poised to go back-to-back. Brett Favre was at the peak of his powers, winning his 3rd straight MVP award, sharing it with Barry Sanders that season. The team finished 13-3, boasting a top 5 offense and defense, led by Reggie White and Leroy Butler. In the playoffs, Green Bay looked just as dominant, crushing the 49ers 23-10 in the NFC Championship. They were 11-point favorites against the Denver Broncos in Super Bowl 32. And most experts assumed John Elway would be adding a 4th Super Bowl loss to his resume. Everything pointed toward the Packers winning their 2nd straight title and cementing themselves as a dynasty. Instead, they ran into a Denver team that refused to be denied. From the opening kickoff, it was clear the Broncos were not intimidated. On Denver's first drive, Terrell Davis ran in a 1-yard touchdown, then added an Elway rushing touchdown in the second quarter. The Packers would answer, but Terrell Davis, who, despite suffering from a migraine that forced him to sit out most of the second quarter, kept shredding the Packers' defense. He finished with 157 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns, including the game winner. The most iconic moment of the game came in the third quarter. On 3rd and 6, Elway scrambled, leapt into the air, and got helicopter spun by Packers defenders, but still picked up the first down. That play energized the Broncos, who refused to back down. With the game tied up at 24 late in the fourth quarter, Denver bled the clock, methodically marching down the field before Davis scored the go-ahead touchdown under 2 minutes. Favre had one last chance. Down 31-24, he led the Packers into Denver territory, but the Broncos defense stepped up. On 4th and 6, Favre's pass fell incomplete, sealing the upset. For Denver, this was John Elway's long-awaited first Super Bowl victory, and it broke the NFC's 13-year winning streak over the AFC. But for the Packers, it was a massive missed opportunity. Reggie White retired after the following season, and the Packers made the playoffs the next year but never reached another Super Bowl with Brett Favre. What should have been the start of a Packers dynasty instead became their last Super Bowl appearance for over a decade. But even more tragic than the '97 Packers were the 1990 Buffalo Bills. They had a loaded offense, featuring Jim Kelly at quarterback, Thurman Thomas in the backfield, and Andre Reed as the top receiver. It was known as the K-Gun offense, a no-huddle attack that was years ahead of its time. The result? A 13-3 record, the number 1 seed in the AFC, and an offense that ranked first in scoring. Buffalo dominated in the playoffs, obliterating the Raiders 51-3 in the AFC Championship. Their opponent in Super Bowl 25 was the New York Giants, a team that had lost its starting quarterback, Phil Simms, late in the season and was riding with backup Jeff Hostetler. The Bills were 7-point favorites, and many expected them to cruise to their first Super Bowl. But what followed was one of the most painful losses in NFL history. The game was a clash of styles. Buffalo's high-speed, explosive offense against the Giants' slow, methodical, ball control approach. The Bills took an early 12-3 lead, and it looked like they might start pulling away. But Bill Parcells and defensive coordinator Bill Belichick had a brilliant plan. Let Thurman Thomas run wild, but completely eliminate Buffalo's passing attack. The Giants controlled the clock, holding the ball for a Super Bowl record 40 minutes and 33 seconds, keeping Jim Kelly and the offense off the field. Despite the Giants' control, the game remained close. The Bills trailed 20-19 late in the fourth quarter, but they had one last chance. Kelly led Buffalo down the field to set up a game-winning 47-yard field goal attempt for kicker Scott Norwood. Then came the moment Bills fans will never forget. Norwood's kick sailed into the air and missed wide right. The Super Bowl over with the Giants winning. Buffalo would go on to lose an unbelievable 4 straight Super Bowls from 1990 to 1993, the only team in history to do so. Despite their Hall of Fame careers, Jim Kelly, Thurman Thomas, and Andre Reed never won a championship. Even though the Bills were one of the best teams of the early 90s, this game set the tone for their Super Bowl curse. But Jim Kelly wasn't the only Hall of Fame quarterback from his era who failed to win a Super Bowl. The 1984 Miami Dolphins were all about one man, Dan Marino. In just his second NFL season, Marino put up numbers that were unthinkable at the time. He threw for 5,084 yards and 48 touchdowns, both NFL records, leading Miami to a 14-2 record and the top seed in the AFC. His quick release, pinpoint accuracy, and fearless deep throws made Miami's offense unstoppable. With Marino at the helm, the Dolphins had the most explosive passing attack the league had ever seen. They tore through the playoffs, crushing the Seahawks 31-10 and dismantling the Steelers 45-28 in the AFC Championship. Heading into Super Bowl 19, Miami was a slight underdog to the 49ers, who were led by Joe Montana. But many believe this could be the start of the NFL's Dan Marino era. However, the game quickly turned into a reality check. Early on, it looked like we were in for a classic shootout. Miami jumped out to a 10-7 lead, but from that point on, it was all Joe Montana and the 49ers. San Francisco's defense, led by Ronnie Lott, shut Marino down. The Dolphins' offense, which had dominated all year, failed to score a single point in the second half.
Montana put on a masterclass, throwing for 331 yards and scoring 4 total touchdowns.
The 49ers held Miami to just 25 rushing yards, forcing Marino to throw 50 times, making the offense one-dimensional. The 49ers won by a final score of 38-16. What was supposed to be the beginning of a new era turned into a harsh lesson. Marino and the Dolphins weren't ready for Montana and the 49ers' all-around dominance. Logically, everyone assumed Marino would be back in the Super Bowl before long. He was only 23 years old, already the league MVP, and seemed destined to win multiple rings. But it never happened. Despite playing for 17 years, Marino never returned to the Super Bowl. The Dolphins never built a strong running game or defense around him, which cost them in the playoffs year after year. Super Bowl 19 remained Marino's only shot at a championship, making him arguably the greatest quarterback to never win a ring. He retired as one of the greatest passers in NFL history, but this game became a symbol of what could have been, and Miami fans were left wondering how it all slipped away so fast. Similar to the 2001 St. Louis Rams, who had the most electric offense at the turn of the century. 2 years earlier, they had taken the league by storm, winning Super Bowl 34 behind their high-octane offense, labeled the greatest show on turf. Quarterback Kurt Warner, running back Marshall Faulk, and receivers Torrey Holt and Isaac Bruce had turned St. Louis into the most dangerous offensive team in the NFL. And in 2001, they somehow got even better. Warner won his second MVP, throwing for 4,830 yards and 36 touchdowns. Faulk was unstoppable, racking up over 2,100 yards from scrimmage, and the Rams finished 14-2, securing the number 1 seed and averaging 31 points per game. They made a mockery of the NFC playoffs, taking down the Packers and Eagles, and entered Super Bowl 36 against the Patriots as 14-point favorites, one of the biggest Super Bowl spreads of all time. The Rams were expected to run circles around New England's unproven young quarterback Tom Brady. Instead, they got a rude awakening. From the start, the Rams were thrown off their game. Bill Belichick's defense played physical, aggressive football, jamming Rams receivers at the line and disrupting their timing. Warner and the offense, which had scored at will all season, were stymied in the first half, throwing a pick-6 to Ty Law and falling behind 14-3. But late in the fourth quarter, the Rams finally started clicking. Warner led 2 scoring drives, tying the game at 17 with just a minute 30 left. At that point, it seemed like the Rams were going to survive and force overtime. But Tom Brady, in his first year as the starter, had other plans. He had been a game manager all night, but he led a masterful drive, getting the Patriots into field goal range. And with 7 seconds left, Adam Vinatieri drilled a 48-yard field goal, and the Patriots pulled off the upset of the young century, winning 20-17. For St. Louis, this was the beginning of the end. Kurt Warner was never the same, battling injuries and inconsistent performance. Marshall Faulk's production declined after years of heavy workload. The Rams never made it back to another Super Bowl with this core. Meanwhile, this game launched the Patriots dynasty. Brady went from unknown backup to Super Bowl MVP, and Belichick's defensive game plan became a blueprint for stopping high-powered offenses. The Rams were one of the best teams to ever lose a Super Bowl, but their fate was sealed by a legendary defensive performance, a last-second kick, and the rise of a Patriots dynasty that would dominate the next 2 decades, particularly in 2007, where they flirted with NFL immortality. After a massive offseason trade for Randy Moss, the Patriots unleashed the most unstoppable offense in league history at the time. Tom Brady, now having undergone a complete metamorphosis from game manager to elite playmaker, shattered records, throwing for 4,806 yards and an NFL record 50 touchdowns, while Moss broke the single-season receiving touchdown record with 23. The Patriots went 16-0 in the regular season, becoming just the second team ever to finish undefeated. They outscored opponents by an average of 20 points per game, the largest margin in modern NFL history. Brady won his first MVP, and the Patriots entered the playoffs obviously as overwhelming favorites. New England rolled through the AFC, beating Jacksonville and surviving a 21-12 AFC Championship game against the Chargers. Only one game remained, Super Bowl 42 against the New York Giants. A 10-6 wildcard team they had already beaten in Week 17. Vegas had the Patriots as 12-point favorites. A win would make them the first 19-0 team in NFL history. They had almost been handed the trophy before the game even began. But from the opening kickoff, something felt off for New England. The Giants' pass rush was relentless, sacking Brady 5 times and harassing him on every dropback. The Patriots, who had averaged nearly 37 points per game, were held to just 7 through 3 quarters. Even with their struggles, New England still had the lead late in the fourth quarter with 2 minutes and 42 seconds left. Brady finally connected with Randy Moss for a go-ahead touchdown, putting the Patriots up 14-10. The perfect season was just 2 minutes away from being complete. Then came one of the most legendary plays in NFL history. Facing 3rd and 5 with just over a minute left, Eli Manning somehow escaped a sure sack, breaking free to throw a desperation pass downfield. David Tyree, a backup wide receiver, leapt into the air and pinned the ball against his helmet as Patriots safety Rodney Harrison tried to rip it away. Somehow, Tyree held on for a 32-yard gain, keeping the drive alive. 4 plays later, Manning hit Plaxico Burress for a game-winning touchdown, putting the Giants ahead 17-14 with almost no time left. Brady had one last chance but couldn't pull it off. Multiple deep shots to Moss fell incomplete. The Giants won by a final score of 17-14, and the Patriots became the only 18-1 team in NFL history, failing to close out their perfect season. Brady and Belichick both admitted this was the hardest loss of their careers. New England wouldn't win another Super Bowl until the 2014 season, and Brady would never get revenge on the Giants. Even though the Patriots went on to win 6 Super Bowls, this loss manages to somehow make their dynasty feel incomplete. Had they won, they would have been considered the greatest team ever, no questions asked. And honestly, they probably were. But instead, they're remembered for being on the wrong side of the biggest upset in Super Bowl history. However, the football gods would repay them 9 years later. Since you're still with me, please subscribe to help the channel grow so I can pump out more quality content for you. Back to the video. The 2016 Atlanta Falcons were one of the most exciting teams in the league. Behind MVP Matt Ryan and superstar wide receiver Julio Jones, Atlanta had the highest scoring offense in the league, averaging 34 points per game. Kyle Shanahan was running the show on offense, with a dynamic run game led by Devonta Freeman and Tevin Coleman, and a passing attack that shredded defenses. Matt Ryan threw for 4,944 yards and 38 touchdowns, winning the MVP. The Falcons finished 11-5, taking the 2 seed in the NFC. And they rolled through the playoffs, dropping 36 points on Seattle and 44 on Green Bay to reach Super Bowl 51. Their opponent? The New England Patriots, a team making their 7th Super Bowl appearance under Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. New England was favored, but Atlanta was faster, younger, and more explosive. However, most importantly, they jumped out to a 28-3 lead via a pick-6 and unstoppable offense. For 3 quarters, the Falcons played flawless football. With a 25-point advantage, the game was already over. At least, that's what everybody thought. With just over 17 minutes of game time left, they still led 28-9. Then, everything unraveled. A crucial strip sack and recovery by New England cost Atlanta a field goal that could have put them up by 3 scores. The Patriots cut it to 28-20 after a touchdown and a 2-point conversion. The Falcons then moved the ball deep into Patriot territory with 4:40 left and the ability to seal the game. But instead, Matt Ryan was sacked on 2nd down, pushing them out of field goal range. A holding penalty on 3rd down made things even worse. They were forced to punt back to Tom Brady. And at this point, everyone knew what was coming. Brady led a 91-yard drive to force overtime, capped off by James White's touchdown and another 2-point conversion. New England won the coin toss, and Brady did what Brady does. The Patriots marched down the field, and James White punched in the game-winning touchdown, completing the greatest comeback in Super Bowl history. Patriots 34, Falcons 28. No team had ever blown a 25-point lead in the Super Bowl. Matt Ryan never returned to another Super Bowl, and the Falcons haven't been back since. Kyle Shanahan left for the 49ers to build his own legacy. 28-3 became an instant meme that will live on forever. Even though the Falcons had one of the best offenses of the century, this game defines them. What should have been their greatest moment became the most infamous collapse in football history. A game that will never be forgotten. If you love NFL mini docs, click this playlist to watch more now, and subscribe for more NFL content.